This is my 169th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge, and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part will continue my progress with my Hornby Dublo 3-rail tabletop railway, covering the completion of preparing and fitting the track work that I had planned. This is where I'd got to at the end of my previous video. I'd laid down track sections to plan out the next round of changes, confirming exactly what sections I would need and how things would fit on the tabletop, but I hadn't actually prepared and connected any of the track for this round of changes. The planned changes basically involved shifting the power feed from the front straight to the front left curve, then putting a right-hand isolating point into the front straight and also connecting the TPO operating track there. Then I planned to add a siding along the front of the table from the newly added point. I also planned to replace the non-isolating point branching the sidings on the right with an isolating point. Then I planned to add another right-hand isolating point into the nearer siding, and then install a branch for the goods depot from that point. We'll see all of this getting done in detail in this video, hopefully. I decided to do the main front section first, as those changes impacted the power feed and the functioning of the main loop, well, the functioning of the whole layout, really. For these changes, I only needed 3 track pieces: an isolating right-hand point from the new lot of points from eBay that just arrived, a curved power feed track from the heavy freight train set, and the TPO operating track. I got these onto the bench to prepare them. I won't cover track preparation in detail here, as I've done that in previous videos. Basically bending the fish plates back into good shape or replacing them if necessary, cleaning the tops of the rails with fine emery paper, bending the tin plate bases to make them lie flat if necessary, and cleaning the end contacts with electrical contact cleaner. The TPO operating track appeared to be in almost new condition, so I didn't use emery paper on it, but I did wipe the rails down with contact cleaner on cotton buds. Given that the rails basically looked clean, I was rather shocked by how much dirt seemed to come off when they were wiped with the contact cleaner. I tested the curved contact track from the train set using a multimeter to make sure that the contacts were connecting to the rails properly with no shorting. Connecting the wires to this track was rather a pain, as rather than the nice knurled knobs that were on the straight power feed track from the Duchess of Athol set, this track had irritating little nuts that were hard to loosen and tighten, as the threaded pins that they were on weren't fixed and turned when I tried to turn the nuts. Did Hornby switch from knurled knobs to these awkward nuts, or did someone just lose the knobs from this track and then replace them with nuts? I don't know. The knobs were certainly way easier to use. But I did manage to get good connections with the nuts, though I had to use 2 pairs of pliers to do it. Then I installed the curved power feed track into the front left corner on the table and connected the other ends of the wires back to the H&M Duet controller. You can see the curved section that I removed, and also the original straight power feed track now removed, sitting on the table at the top in this picture. I installed one of the new isolating points that I just received to the right of the level crossing. I did clean up the rails on that point, and I did fix its switching contacts. I did also scrub down the base a bit with some alcohol and an old toothbrush, but I guess the base still looks pretty dirty. To the right of that point, in the main loop, I installed the TPO operating track. At this point I didn't connect up the separate switched power for operating the TPO equipment. That would connect with the 2 knurled knobs at the back right of the TPO equipment. I'll probably drill through to pass the wires straight down beside there, and then put the push-button switch for operating the TPO equipment somewhere on the front of the table. To complete the front section running from the level crossing to the point for the reversing loop stations, etc. at right, I needed a 1/4 straight and a 1/2 straight, and they were both sections that I'd previously used. I didn't connect up the sections for the front siding at this point, as I wanted to test the changes to the main loop first. So I ran the 8F loco, which was already sitting on the tracks at the back, round the main loop, through the newly changed sections. It did run, so the power feed worked okay, but the running test did show up some bad connections which I had to fix before I could get smooth running without derailing. It's not always easy to get good connections with both fish plates when joining track sections. With the changes to the main loop done, I turned my attention to the interior sidings on the right. When I initially installed these sidings, I used a standard non-isolating point to branch between them, as I didn't have any more isolating points on hand at the time. But with a non-isolating point, it would really only be possible to use the sidings one at a time, since if there was a loco in one of the sidings, I wouldn't be able to pull a loco into the other siding without also powering the loco in the first siding. So that left-hand standard point needs to be replaced with a left-hand isolating point, now that I've received more. Then I wanted to add a right-hand isolating point at the start of the right-hand siding, so that I could have another branch on which I was planning to have a goods depot. I did those updates to the points and then installed the straight sections for the goods branch. I didn't have any full straights left, well, other than the power feed, so this branch was made entirely with half straights. I tested the new points and the new branch using the 264 tank engine. Everything worked okay first time in this case. I made paper templates for the engine shed and the goods depot so that I could see how things would fit. I'll be using the Superquick 2-road engine shed kit for the engine shed, and for that I took Superquick's template picture and scaled it on my PC to print at actual size. For the goods depot, the Hornby catalogue said that it would be 11.5 inches wide, and I guessed the depth from looking at pictures. Clearly, with the engine shed in place, there wouldn't be room for the goods depot on the far side of the branch, so it's going to have to go on the near side of the branch, which is okay. Finally, I prepared and connected up the sections for the front siding, and tested it by running the 264 tank to the end. It may be a bit awkward using this siding, as it is rather close to the front of the table. Also, being at the front, things parked there will tend to get knocked over if I have to reach across the table, as I know from experience. But still, it will give me somewhere else to park things. I could actually park 7 locos on this track now and still have an 8th loco running round the main loop, although I actually don't have any current plans to acquire as many as 8 3-rail locos. There's a manual uncoupling track at the start of the front siding and another at the start of the goods branch. I haven't tried to actually use those yet, and I'm not sure how useful they'll be. So that's my track plan basically completed. I'm not at the moment thinking of making any more changes to the tracks. Of course, I need to tidy up, removing tools and unused track from the table, and ultimately I want to screw the tracks down so long as my 2mm screws will work in the foam tabletop, and the TPO needs to be connected up and tested, and I have to build the engine shed from the Superquick kit. I updated my track plan diagram to reflect all of these latest changes. To start with, the diagram was actually planning out in advance what I was thinking of doing. Then the later changes got firmed up by trying actual track sections on the table for fit, so now the diagram is really just documenting what I've done, but I think that's useful. Here are some track sections that I have left, 2 more isolating points from the new order, both left-hand, 2 diamond crossings that I couldn't see how to use, and lots of standard curves. There are more standard curves, in fact, because there are 5 or 6 more still in the freight train box. And there are several unused track sections still on the tabletop. The non-isolating left-hand point that I took out, also taken out the straight power feed in another curve, and another manual uncoupling track, and 2 of the level crossing half straights, and also the 3/4 length piece left over from when I cut track for the initial setup. Anyway, I'll tidy up a bit and move on, but there's my tabletop 3-rail track plan basically complete.